I'm Ashley Guzman. Welcome to the podcast where we talk to innovators and thought leaders in resilience. And I am thrilled to have Ray Holloman here with me today. And I wanted to snag him for a while and talk to him as we've passed each other in conferences. So really happy that we have him on to talk today. So before we really jump in, I just wanted to thank all of the audience for listening in. Really appreciate, and please like and subscribe so that helps grow the channel. Now let's dive in. So Ray, I know that you're currently a senior program manager for enterprise disaster recovery for F5. So I understand that F5 is a multi-cloud application service and security company. So can you give the audience just a little background on your role?
Yeah, so I've been here at F5 for about a year at this point, and so I am the governance leader for disaster recovery. So really, if you think about all things disaster recovery, and also I got data protection added in there as well, all of those things, all of those facets, the program, what people need to do, what they need to comply with, what kind of architecture designs that they need to look for. I kind of help set all that up, and I work with all of our different, let's say, application stacks and make sure that they're meeting the enterprise level disaster recovery, because F5 has grown over the last 2 years through acquisition. And so a lot of what we've seen is that everybody's at various levels of disaster recovery. So I'm kind of coming in here as part of the enterprise resilience program to help everybody get to like the same foundational platform of having consistent disaster recovery, having consistent data protection to ensure that if something does happen to any part of our business, we're able to recover and still take care of our customers.
Ray, how is disaster recovery really evolving? How have you seen it evolved over the last few years?
Disaster recovery has changed so much. I started, 10 years ago, and, the big thing then was like, oh, we're getting replication installed. And that was like like our RTOs were going to get so much quicker and so much tighter. And now we're looking at like, we're not even talking about hours anymore. We're talking about like minutes to recover at this point. That people, because I think we've seen through the big outages of like Netflix and Hulu, that downtime is no longer really being accepted by like consumers and by really businesses.
By the business, yeah.
They don't understand the cost that goes behind all of that or all the technology. They're just like, I don't want to be down until you give them the price tag.
None of us do.
Yeah, like who wants to be down? Yeah. But I think that's really the thing is, how do we, we've moved from this like replication era, which is like the best you could get, to really being what I'm saying is highly available, where your data is always there. You can always get to it. Like we pick up our phones and we expect to be able to get to our email, get to our text messages, get to anything like that. And that's what we're seeing now move into the business world, even though the business world is a large ship to turn sometimes, and trying to get all of that in place. And so I'm really just seeing that the speed and the need to have quick recovery is what's so important now.
Right. And you seem really, passionate about InfoSec and DR. And I wasn't able to sit in on your presentation at DRJ Spring, but I heard great things about it. So could you share a little bit about that presentation for those like myself who weren't able to listen in?
Yeah, so at Spring DRJ this year, I really talked about cloud testing and how that's, for a lot of people, that's really become a new frontier as we go into, if we think about the traditional ways that we used to test, it's like, we did all the stuff either in-house or we used a third-party vendor to do all of that. Now we're really looking at what does it look like to maybe release some of that control, to have like a SaaS vendor do some of that for us. How do we ensure that all of those integrations really work together? Because just because they work in production, do they work when we have to switch to a DR location, or if our vendor has to switch to a DR location? So it's running through all of those different types of scenarios and really ensuring for your company and for yourself what makes sense. One of the big things that I talked about was just security. That's become a really huge part. And so that may mean that a company may not want to go all in for a public cloud. So they may go to a hybrid cloud or a private cloud, something that they have a little bit more control over. But really the biggest thing that I wanted to get through to people is that just because you move to the cloud and you move to one of these vendors does not inherently mean you have disaster recovery.
Mm,
That is like the biggest thing that I'm continually running up against when I talk to people. They're like, oh, well, we moved to the cloud. But I'm like, what's in your contract? They're like, it's the cloud. It's always there. I'm like, no,
no.
you still have to pay for
Oh, it's
disaster recovery.
still right. It's
You,
still a data center somewhere.
somewhere. I'm like, really, all you did was change your cost model. So
Mm,
now you're not having to make those capital expenditures, but you're still making quite a bit of operational expenditures. And depending on what type of company you are, that may or may not make sense for you.
mm,
And so it's really just getting that across to people. I don't know how many conversations I've had with leadership, discussing that, yes, you move to the cloud, but it's still going to be as expensive or maybe even more expensive
mm,
to have a disaster recovery location. Where you do get some benefits is that you're not paying for it if you don't use it, but you
mm.
still have to do all the testing, all the verification, all of those things that we've traditionally always had to do. It's just we just don't have control over that infrastructure anymore.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, what if there's a limitation on infrastructure because they lose an entire region and everybody has to move? Or did you ensure that in your contract you had enough space available and they allocated enough for you? So it's just getting people to really think about those, really think through that decision to move to the cloud. What does that really mean? How does that change my cost model? And how does that change my testing model? Because sometimes it's not as easy to bring applications that are in the cloud back onto, an on-site data center. That was one of the big things that I've been trying to figure out is like, we did a lot of different things to keep our tests secure. So because we have all these security things in place, we can't just bring something from the outside web back into our data center.
Mm,
So how do you go about that kind of testing? And so it's really about getting more creative, maybe changing not necessarily what you test, but how do you go about testing and verifying those applications are good and whole when you come back up?
It's such an important point because the piece that you're talking about in terms of, companies, and I see it as, twofold. It's one, they're shifting their exposure, right? And their risk in some respects, but they're limiting it in others, like you said, by no longer having to have direct care, so to speak, for the infrastructure. But there's still risk, right? Because it's a reliance on that other, whether it's AWS or, any of the other providers out there. It's shifting it, right? You're shifting that exposure. You're limiting the risk in some way, but then you're opening yourself up to new risks because you have that reliance. So I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, along those lines, how do you define resilience?
I think I kind of look at it from this way of how do I keep going? How do something happens, how do we keep it moving? Whatever that takes. One thing here at F5 for the last year, a lot of it's been about that foundational.
Hmm.
Like, yes, we want to meet our RTOs and RPOs, but how do we ensure that the company will keep going?
Hmm.
Because you want to try to tackle everything all at once, but there's not enough time, money, or resources to do that. So how do you start? And so that's really what's been interesting and kind of shifting this for me is saying like, well, right now I'm just worried about making sure that the company can stay going. Even if it takes us a week or 2 weeks to get back up, that's better than the company going out of business. So it's that just the innate ability to keep going, even in the face of whatever else is happening. And so that's where I kind of really see it as, you know, we everything plays a different part. We may use disaster recovery, high availability, we may use backups. All of these different things kind of all come in together to be like the technical resiliency. But then you also have your operational and financial resiliencies that companies definitely have been looking into and through over the last 2 years, especially with COVID, of like, how do we stay afloat in an ever changing environment? Because it feels like over the last few years, nothing has been like any of the year before it. So it's like we're just constantly trying to keep going. And I think we see a lot of that in resilience as well.
And so we've talked about, how we've gotten to here, But what are the trends that you're seeing for information security and DR going forward?
Yeah, I think cloud is just going to come to play a bigger role, but I think we're also going to see some retraction in that. I think there was this big play for everybody to move to the cloud, everybody wanting to get out of the data center management space. But I
Mm.
think we're also going to see somewhat of a retraction of that as well, because people are realizing that maybe for like my core systems, the things that I truly need to hold valuable, that I need to have control over those things. And then things that are not necessarily as core to what the company organization needs, that those are things that we put into the cloud. So I think we're going to continue to see this kind of hybrid world. And I think we're going to also, just from a information security perspective, there's not an industry that is touched that we don't see the need for information security
Mm.
professionals in. And so I think that's just going to be, how do we continue to get more people into the field? How do we get them educated quickly, but also making sure that they're knowledgeable? And so I think that's really going to be a huge piece of it, is just making sure we have enough people to continue doing this work, because this is touching everything and we have so much data that needs to be protected. We need to make sure that we have good professionals that are doing that protection.
It is. It's such a mix. And like I was saying with the risk, I think it sounds like companies are really trying to balance the best of cloud availability and services with, right, understanding what their needs are and what they need to protect, and when it may need to still be a physical data center and having that infrastructure. And I keep thinking about all the legacy. Many companies have so many legacy tools as well. And that seems to be coming to the fore as well. You know, how important it is to take a look at that, because we have these great new services and apps and systems, but we still have some of that old reliance that we haven't shifted yet. So,
Yeah, no one's thinking about how to get rid of the mainframe,
and
but we need to start thinking about that,
yeah,
because who else is going to program for it?
yeah. And some of those people, right, are,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say, retiring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what are you most excited about right now, and what's ahead next for you?
Right now, I'm excited for my next presentation that I'm doing here in June. I was actually just working on it earlier, because for me, it's a little bit different from what I traditionally do, which is I talk about IT disaster recovery all day, in and out. So this one's a little bit more interesting to me, just from a perspective of, but it's from still that my experience is of, what does it look like when you bring, your crisis communication team, your continuity team, and your project management teams together, and have them all running exercises and events?
Mm.
And so just really taking that kind of approach for it. So I'm really excited for that, because it's a little bit different than what I have traditionally done in the IT space. And so I'm just really excited for that coming up here in June.
Oh, so tell us the name of the presentation and where you're giving it.
Yeah, I'm giving it the name of the presentation is Bringing It All Together: Crisis, Continuity,
Great.
and Project Management. And I'm giving it at the International Crisis Management Conference here in June, which I think you're also speaking at
Yes, so
as
we'll see each
well.
other sooner
Yes,
than fall
yes,
DRJ.
yes. So
Great.
I'm pretty excited for that, because it's just something a little bit different. And so uh, excited just to be able to share my experience and how that type of environment and exercises actually was really beneficial
Mm.
for my overall training and awareness program. People actually knew we existed more after combining all these groups together. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It's such a great theme for right now too, because I'm hearing that throughout the industry. You know, really looking at, I don't consider the work that we do project management, right? But there are so many aspects in keeping things moving forward where that makes sense. So I think that'll be such an interesting talk. So, you know, just giving Rob Burton and his team at ICMC a little plug. I hope people will join us
Hmm.
at the conference. So it should be a good time over in at Newport, Rhode Island,
Yeah,
coming up in June, like you said. So,
yeah.
hey, can you give this audience a little better understanding of your background and how you got into the work? Because I think it's always fascinating. Some of us are voluntold and getting into the space, but other of us get into it from other ways. So I'd love to hear your background.
Yeah, so my background is was getting my master's degree in information security, and business continuity disaster recovery came up
Mm,
as one of our, at the time, the CISSP had it as one of the domains. And so that just really interested me a whole lot because it was like there was two domains that I really had a big interest in: physical security,
mm,
business continuity, and disaster recovery. And so I ended up doing my capstone project. At the time, I worked on the service desk at the company I was at. And I had seen over the past probably 4 years I had been there, every time we needed to evacuate our building, we
mm.
did it differently.
Really?
And so I was like, why is there no consistency with this? And come to find out, our business continuity plans had not been updated for remote working. They had not been updated for any of those, any of
Hmm.
like the new features that we had. And so I went through and spent about 4 months redoing all of our business continuity, disaster recovery plans. And I actually talked with the people at my company who did business continuity and disaster recovery. And so graduated. My first manager at the company's brother was over our disaster recovery
Yeah.
program. And so when he had an open position come up, she let me know, and then I basically followed up with him every couple of weeks once I knew the position was open, because I just was
Motivation.
so interested in it. And so then that's how I got started in it. I did IT disaster recovery about 9 years for a healthcare company. And then I switched over here now to F5 in the last year, but kind of just got into it because like I really had an interest for it, and basically just thinking through all the different ways to get our jobs done was just really exciting to me, and being able to put that puzzle together. So I was not one of the people that was voluntold. I
No,
actually
you chose
really
it.
went after. I
Yeah.
really went after it, and I have
Love to hear that.
enjoyed it so much since I've been here.
I love that journey that you've taken, and it's so great to hear that you sought it out, right? And you were motivated and you really made it happen. So I think you're an inspiration to a lot of people out there. So thanks for sharing your story. Hey, is there anything else that you want to share that we haven't talked about yet today?
Yeah, I just think that, as we continue to see the advancements in disaster recovery, because I think that's really what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of advancements. We can't forget about the things that have kind of always worked. I feel like that's usually a really big thing. People are like, oh, well, we've got all this nice flashy stuff. But I'm like, sometimes just like, yes, you can have a great automated plan, but what happens if that plan doesn't work?
Mm,
Do you have that continuity for your plan? Because I've seen where somebody
flexibility.
had a script, and the script, the software version they had used upgraded, and it didn't work anymore. And so it's like
Mm,
they manually needed to go through those steps now, but no one knew how. And
yeah.
so it's like just thinking about
I know.
like what, even though technology can be very helpful, it can also sometimes hurt us. So not to have
Mm,
an over reliance on that technology, and still just ensuring that we're keeping those plans and having like what's the manual workaround if it may be necessary, because sometimes you never know when it may be.
yeah. That's such a great point. And I think too, like of any of our plan types, right? Whether it's a run book or, it's a DR plan specifically or a business continuity plan, I always try to tell people that you need to think about it less of a recipe book to make a cake and you follow the exact directions and it comes out a certain way, as more of, a playbook and a football, right? Sense that you may be making changes to your plays on the field as it's going down because things have changed and you're not where you thought you were going to be, right? So it's such a great point. And I like that you're pushing that into the IT space too, because I'm seeing there's a lot of risk, right? We have a lot of increased risk, even with all of the amazing work that people like you and your teams are doing and others are doing in this space. It's just the reality, right, of the way the world has changed, post COVID, with more of us working from home and heavier reliance on outside, as you said, outside reliance for the cloud or also on vendors, right? It's just a different reality today, and we're so highly reliant on our technology, and it's the volume, right? It's the volume of the work that we can get done that we couldn't get done as effectively. But as you know very well, when our tools don't work, they don't work.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. And hey, do you have a fun fact that you'd like to share before we close out?
Tiny farm, so I have chicken and quail that I keep up with.
Wow.
And so that's what I go and do, like in between meetings, or if I need to just step away, I go and hang out with my chickens for a little bit.
Nice. I don't have animals yet, but a garden. So
Yeah,
definitely moving into that space. I would love to have chickens.
chickens
That'll
are
be a
so much
future
fun.
adventure. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Ray, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate the time to talk to you. And now I'm even more excited that I'm going to be able to see you coming up in June, and then I'll get to see you again in the fall. So I really
Yeah,
appreciate you jumping on and sharing this perspective, because I think people are so interested in the topics, and as we're seeing DR move more into the resiliency space, as much as you still need to respond, right? And
mhm.
then, like you said, InfoSec is such an important aspect of protecting our companies and ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Hopefully I have you back soon.